Standard's 24,
Right.
28 is the standard.
Mm.
And I think we got a waiver for 2.
It's gonna be 22, but then it has to be built to the standard for that other stuff. Right? So it's not a street, it's just a garage. Seven, but it's only one more person. We're not live, though.
We aren't live
We're
tonight?
not live.
What else is on the City Hall tonight?
Something's going on in the aldermanic chambers. Yeah, that's,
We'll wait a few minutes there. Still need somebody, right?
What's that?
We still need somebody.
Yeah, we still, yeah, we have no choice
We're
but to
waiting.
wait.
Got the card signed
Whose
up?
card, who's that one?
Jerry,
Jerry?
Jerry and Mike.
Jerry and Mike?
Yeah.
The cart before your horse.
I've got a safe buffer.
better I was gonna have to sit next to the cart, but.
Jerry and Mike
Attacked
both
by car.
indicated they were coming? Jerry and Mike both did?
Jerry's supposed to be here and Mike Pedersen both said they'd be here tonight.
Okay.
So,
We're not live
We're not
tonight? Okay. Yeah, let's hang on a little bit.
Steve, is Kinsley Street still passable?
No,
No, no, it's not? Okay.
avoid it at all costs. You can talk with Joe Mandola, thought I saw him coming. He's responsible for it.
Where did he go?
I should just have him make me an alternate so I can fill in situations like this.
We didn't hear from Dave Robbins, did not respond, and
No.
Alderman Tenza, I think he's had another meeting.
Yeah, downstairs, right?
And Ed could not make it tonight.
Well, if we get, we'll give it a few minutes, maybe we can go grab Alderman Tenza to open the meeting.
Yeah, come up and get it going.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me see if anybody emailed me.
And we got Jerry's
Jerry-
phone number.
Actually, I can text him.
Okay.
Let me text Jerry. There's some words in there I thought I said. Where is this?
Somebody done.
Oh, we're good.
Here's a.
The quorum.
Right.
Okay, you don't have to.
All right.
There's Mike. There's Mike, no more plastic bags.
All right.
Just in time.
Do you want to knock on the door, and let them know we're starting? Okay.
That's it.
I think you can hear me.
I'd like to call to order this meeting of the March 21st, 2019 City of Nashua Planning Board. Do we have somebody, Maggie, you've got the roll call?
Are you doing?
I do.
You have the list? Okay.
Mayor Donges, Mike Pedersen,
Present.
Scott Leclaire,
Here?
Adam Varley,
Here?
Edward Weber, Alderman David Tenza, Alderman Mary Ann Malizik-Golja, Steve Dukran,
Present.
David Robbins, Jerry Rapucci, Maggie Harper, present.
Okay, so we have enough members here for a quorum, so we're gonna go ahead and begin. We have in front of us the minutes from the March 7th, 2019 meeting. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at those and want to make a motion as to whether they are acceptable as written? guess it'd be either Mike or Steve. Oh, no, you were here too, right?
I was
So,
here.
okay, so I need you three. Good.
Did approve?
All right, so we have a motion to approve by Mr. Dukran. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Peterson. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions?
One abstention?
One. So, motion passes 401. One abstention, yep. Oh,
I
Adam,
abstained,
yep.
yes.
Okay, communications?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Planning Board. If you turn to your packet, there are a couple of items in that. There is one email from an abutter on case number 1 with concerns about their driveway being blocked. You should read that when that comes up.
Yep.
And then also, as we said last meeting, we did laminate the discussion on the sidewalk with the particular calculation and formula which is on the back side of that. So the board has it for every meeting to refer to. As well as it's also spelled out in the staff reports as well, how we calculate the fee.
Okay,
Okay?
great.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, report of committees. I don't know if we have anybody here that has any committee stuff. Nobody there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and read the procedure of the meetings and hearings. So we're gonna start after each legal notice of a conditional special use permit, site plan, or subdivision is read by myself. The board will determine if the application is complete and ready to take jurisdiction. The public hearing will begin, at which time the applicant or representative will be given a time to present an overview and description of their project. They shall speak to whether or not they agree with the recommended staff stipulations, and the board will have time and opportunity to ask relevant follow-up questions of the applicant or staff. I'll then ask for testimony from the audience. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition or concern to the plan may speak. When you come forward to the microphone, please make sure you state your name and address for the record. That would be the time for you to express your concerns or any questions that you might have regarding the plan. After I ask for anybody wishing to speak in opposition or concern, I'll next ask for anybody to come forward who wishes to speak in favor of the plan. The board will then ask any relevant follow-up questions of the applicant. The applicant will be given a rebuttal period, at which time they'll respond to any concerns raised by the prior public testimony. If so needed, I will let any of the concerned public get together, elect one representative to come forward one last time, and be allowed to respond to any of those items brought forth during the applicant's rebuttal period. After that is completed, the public hearing will end and the board will resume the public meeting, at which time we will deliberate and vote on the application before us. I'd ask that both sides keep their remarks to the subject in hand and not to repeat what has already been said. We want to be fair to everyone and make the best possible decision based on the testimony presented and considering all the applicable approval criteria established in our Nashua revised ordinances for conditional special use permits, site plans, and subdivision plans. I thank everybody at this time for their interest and courteous attention, and ask that if you do have a cell phone, that you go ahead and either turn it off or put it on vibrate at this time. Thanks. Okay, so old business conditional special use permits, there are none. Old business subdivision plans, there are none. Old business site plans, there are none. New business conditional special use permits, there are none. New business subdivision plan, case number 1, David and Pamela Peabody, owner, application and acceptance of proposed lot line relocation and 2-lot subdivision. This property is located at 58 Linton Street. Has anybody at the board had a chance to look at the application and would like to make a motion of whether we take jurisdiction?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion to take jurisdiction by Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harbour. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Okay, Mr. Maynard, it's yours.
For the record,
Yep.
my name is Richard Maynard, licensed professional engineer with Maynard and Parkett Engineering of Nashua, representing the applicants and property owners, David and Pamela Peabody. Property of concern is 3 lots of record located at 58 Linton Street, south of the Sunset Heights Elementary School. The notice in the staff report labeled this as a subdivision. This is not quite correct. The property is 3 lots of record, and the proposal before the board is to relocate one lot line and to consolidate the remainder with the other lots. This project is going from 3 lots of record to 2 lots. There are no new lots being created, thus this is not a subdivision. The 3 lots together contain 15,161 square feet, and after lot line relocation consolidation, we'll end up with a 7,585 square foot lot for the existing house and a 7,576 square foot buildable lot. The property is in the RA zone, which requires 7,500 square feet, for lots and 75 feet of lot width. The property is essentially flat, and the soils are considered excessively well drained. The new house will be served by a single leach and catch basin to be located to the rear of the house. There are 3 waivers to be considered. 2 of these are fairly standard, and they are for underground utilities and features within 1,000 feet. The 3rd waiver is for sidewalks. By the way, I would like to get a copy of that memo on sidewalks that Roger introduced his correspondence. And I think the rest of the firms that work in the city would be interested too.
That's not it.
Oh, I don't think that's it. I think that's the,
Huh?
I think that's the abutters letter.
Oh, but,
Yeah.
you mean, these are on, I think they're online,
They're
are they not?
online.
They're
Yeah,
online,
the
yeah.
minutes
The
from,
minutes are online.
yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's
from,
just the minutes.
I don't normally look for that, but, okay.
okay.
Anyway, the 3rd waiver regards sidewalks. It was my understanding that if no new lots were being created, then the sidewalk contribution, then the sidewalk construction, including a contribution, was not required. The staff report, item 3, implies that a contribution is required, and because there's no new lots being created, we disagree. We also think that requiring any contribution to be made at the time of plan recording is an unnecessary burden on a property owner. With that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
So, questions of the applicant by the board? I just have a question for staff. So with regard to whether this is a lot line relocation, in your opinion, or a subdivision, or?
It's a lot line relocation, and it's also you're moving and you're subdividing the properties. I think we always.
There's no subdividing, Scott. It's all, there's no new lots. It's all consolidation or lot line relocation.
Under state law, a lot line, it is a subdivision, you're changing lines, you aren't just creating
Yeah.
any new lots. He's actually reducing the number of lots from 3. I don't know if those are buildable lots currently
Yes.
today? Are
There
they
are lots
under-
of record,
Lots of records, but are they buildable?
recorded plans, buildable.
Under the same ownership since 19, what is that date, 86?
Doesn't have to be in the same ownership, but as long as
Well,
nobody
has it been?
consolidates.
Yeah, well, it doesn't meet the standards.
No,
It's still technically under state law.
no, it falls under the subdivision regulations.
It
is-
does.
It's not a subdivision.
Well,
It falls under the rules of subdivision, but it's not a subdivision. This is formed prior to our current GIS tax maps. This is the city's tax map, 3 lots of record. There were several other lots similar to this in the neighborhood. So this is what's called an involuntary merger. Under the RSA's a year or 2 or 3 ago, I can't remember now, the state RSA's made it illegal to force a merger of adjacent properties to conform with the current zoning ordinance. Therefore, these 3 are non-conforming lots of record. They are lots of record. There's no new lots being created here, so. And that was my understanding. If there's no new lots are being created, then subdivisions and sidewalks are not a consideration, so, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Peterson?
The board received a letter from the across-the-street neighbor from the applicant, saying previous project to that house, her driveway got blocked and she couldn't get out. So is the applicant aware that it needs to keep the trucks away from the front of her driveway?
He is now, I'm not sure who that contractor may have been. I don't necessarily think it's anything to do with my property owner, but he may have worked on my client's property. I don't know where he worked. If anybody ever gets their driveway blocked, then we should call the police. It's a violation, and there's nothing, you know, there's nothing I can do about people violating the rules and regs and laws, you
So
know.
the applicant is aware this is not gonna happen.
Sure, and as is
Like, I get what he's saying.
all contractors. The applicant's not gonna do this work, it's the contractor that did the violation, all right?
Thank you.
I think we should probably, I mean, we would, you know, ordinarily maybe reserve a discussion about sidewalk issues until we got into the public meeting, but given that, you know, to avoid the possibility of just having to call engineer Maynard back, I think we should probably have a discussion about what we think is the appropriate application of the rule here. I mean, I think, if I understand Roger saying, this is within the statutory definition, it's still a subdivision. Even if as a practical matter, you know, as Mr. Maynard says, we're not creating new lots. So, I mean, it sounds like it would be within the scope of the ordinance, in terms of the requirement of sidewalks. Roger, is that a fair statement? You know, in term, just looking at the application of the ordinance for sidewalks, because this is technically a subdivision within the definition that the ordinance would apply here?
It is. The lots that are being created are not the same lots that they were before. However, we do have a letter in the file. We didn't really anticipate this from, was it from the owner, Richard Maynard, agreeing to pay the contribution? So I'm not sure why there's an issue tonight.
Excuse me, that letter says more than the contribution. It says we don't think I think it says these are lots of record, and in fact, it's a note on the plan. If you read note, I think it's 23. Existing lots of record and no new lots being created, thus no sidewalk required.
But when you, I mean, you say no new lots being created, but I mean, there's 3 lots now, and there's gonna be 2 lots after
Correct.
this plan were approved, so
Going
those,
from 3 to 2.
right, so those are new lots, and that they are different lots than exist today.
Adam, please.
Well,
That's baloney. Sorry, but that's baloney. No new lots. It's going from 3 to 2. You have fewer lots. No.
I don't understand how you could come, I mean, if this were a single lot and you subdivided it into 2, I mean, it would still be the same physical area, right? But
Doesn't
you're
matter.
creating
That's
new
a
lots.
different thing. If it's a single lot and I was creating 2, I'm increasing the number of lots that, and therefore, I fall under the ordinance. But according to reading the ordinance, if you're not creating a new lot,
Mr. Chair, instead of passing around, can you just tell us what it's saying?
no.
Sorry, yeah, I can read it. So this is a letter dated March 13th, 2019. It says, "Dear Chairman Leclerc, on behalf of our client, we hereby request a waiver of sidewalk construction for 114 feet of principal frontage along the new proposed lot on Linton Street in lieu of a $5,700 contribution to be paid at the time of building permit application. It is important to note that there are no sidewalks located within 250 feet of the project. The board's favorable consideration of this item is appreciated." That's it.
Okay. Any other questions for the,
Yeah. Mr. Maynard,
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand if it is a lot line relocation. So we got the entire 3 parcels. So you got 2 property lines on the inside. So lot line relocations are you moving one line, A line from here to there. So you're moving 2 lines. So,
No, I'm removing one line and eliminating the other.
so what is eliminating a line constitute? What does that constitute? Eliminating a line, what is that? It's a merger?
But, Richard, you need a microphone.
Grab that mic, Richard, right there. That one will work, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
On the plan of record, there are 3 lots like this. The lot line relocation is to move this lot line to here, and then to consolidate the remainder into one lot. That's all it does. You lose one lot line, and you move the other. You lose that line, and that line goes to there. That's a typical lot line relocation consolidation.
All right, so that sounds like that's what he's doing, all right?
Falls under the subdivision regs. But it's not a subdivision.
Just, Roger,
Well,
for my own edification, if, you know, if there were just two lots there and we were pulling one line out and consolidating them, would the sidewalk requirement kick in then?
we believe it does. What we could do, obviously, Mr. Maynard disagrees. We can certainly table, if you want to table it, and we'll get a legal opinion. That might be if he's, wants to argue the point. Application says it's a subdivision plan, so, and it's signed by whom?
The owner.
The owner.
I will go along with that recommendation.
All right, well, we're still in the hearing. Do we have any other questions? I mean, we can ask the applicant if they want to go along with that. Was that something
I'm
you
sorry, I
wanted?
didn't hear you.
I said, we have the option to table, get a reading on it, and take this up at the next meeting.
One moment.
I'm happy to, I think that, I'd be okay doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is a subdivision, a lot line relocation, and a subdivision.
You're moving a lot, and you're creating the subdivision.
I just spoke to my applicant. He'd be willing to table it and so you can get a ruling, and hopefully the ruling comes and sent to me before the meeting so we can review it.
I think that wouldn't be a problem
case.
for us. Yeah, I think we can that wouldn't be a problem.
But,
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? I mean,
yeah, is that the only issue the board thinks is outstanding?
I don't have anything else that I would want to ask about.
I just want to point out, and maybe you caught this already, according to the subdivision plan, the new lot has a lot number 265. I think that was supposed to be two.
Yeah, we fixed that.
Fix that, okay. Good, that's all.
Mr. Chair, you might want to, if there's people in the audience that
Yeah, I'll
maybe
take,
not be able to come
Yeah,
back.
we're not done.
next time.
right, yeah, no, I'm not done yet, yeah, okay.
Richard's not done.
No. The item's not done.
Okay, at this point, I'd ask if there's anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition to the application that's been presented? Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the application presented? Okay. So I think the procedure is we gotta close into the meeting, okay. So at this time, I'm gonna go ahead and close let me ask, is there any other information of the applicant that you want to put in during the hearing?
No.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the hearing then, move into the public meeting. All right, so we've talked about potentially tabling this, that's one option, and requesting a reading from our council on the application of that sidewalk contribution. That's one option. Obviously, the other option is we can still go ahead and go forward, or we can go ahead and disapprove, so.
I
Anybody?
prefer that we get a legal opinion.
Okay.
It's good to clear this matter up.
Sure.
For special future purposes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
So anybody want to make a motion to that effect? Be a table motion. Mr. Varley?
I would make a motion to table new business number 1, subdivision plan, David M. and Pamela L. Peabody, for the specific purpose of obtaining a review and opinion from Corporation Counsel as to whether the city sidewalk ordinance would apply to this plan.
All right, so we have that motion as presented by Mr. Varley. Do we have a second on it?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Opposed? None? So that be tabled till next meeting. Okay? All right. Moving on. New business subdivision plan, case number 2. The Landing at Nashua LLC owner, Anagnost Investments, Inc. Application and acceptance of proposed 3-lot subdivision. Property is located at 2 East Spitbrook Road. Can I have a motion as to whether or not this application is ready to take jurisdiction?
Make that motion?
We have a motion to take jurisdiction by Mr. Varley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Thanks. You can go ahead and present your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, my name is Dick Anagnost. I'm the manager of Nashua Landing LLC, and with me tonight is my co-developer, Rob Parsons, and Ken Rhodes from, I almost said CLD, it's now Fussin' O'Neill. Thank you for taking the time to look at the plan. It's a simple application. It's before you. We have approximately 42 acres of land located off Spitbrook Road. We're looking to divide it into a 3-lot subdivision. And I guess my engineer is going to pull it up for you on the screens. Better him than me. So we'd be dividing it into a 3-lot subdivision. That's the only action before you tonight. There will be future site plans. We don't have tenants yet for the site, but we feel that it's imperative that we subdivide it because this is the former W.R. Grace and Dow Chemical plant. There is an activity use restriction that's put on by the DES. We're in the middle of our brownfields application. We expect to receive brownfields probably in the next 60 days, 90 at the outside. The application's already been preliminarily approved. We need to have our public hearing, and then we would be able to move forward. The brownfields will pertain to the 2 lots that you see that are not colored in green, and the activity use restriction will remain with the lot that's in green. That being said, that's a brief overview, and Ken, now that he has had the ability to put it up, we'll take it from here.
Okay.
I guess I'll take it from here. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ken Rhodes, again, with Fussin' O'Neill. This is a very straightforward request before you this evening. There's about 40 acres of land to be divided into 3 parcels. Again, Dick has put good voice to the idea that in the area of use restriction, dividing it away from these 2 other parcels gives the opportunity for 2 relatively pretty significant development sites. This site in the orange-yellow color has full frontage on East Spitbrook Road. To the south, the aqua-colored parcel in the middle has access and full frontage off of this public street. We worked diligently with your staff to make this subdivision plat comply with city ordinance. The subdivision parcel, the subdivision set is here in, full 6-part harmony, by our land surveyor of record, Greg Brown. And the other piece of information, at least early in discussion here, is that we would, again, consistent with some of the early master planning that we've been talking about, this doesn't show as well on this exhibit, or on the television as it does on your exhibit, but internal to all of these parcels, without locating exactly how these connections would be made, because we don't know how the individual developments are going to be laid out in the site plans that will come before you later, it is very much part of Nashua Landing's purpose and intent to link East Spritbrook Road with, I believe this is Venture Way. Well,
Adventure.
thank you, sir. Adventure Way. The drive here, and with a little cooperation with the city and some of the northern abutters, we may get an opportunity to get out to Daniel Webster Highway to the north. I have a tendency to babble on, so I'm going to try to restrain myself. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks. So, with regard to the configuration of Lot 3, so the intent of that configuration is to capture sort of the brownfield area that
Right.
needs further time to
That
kinda-
is, Mr. Chair, the exact configuration of the activity use
Right.
restriction.
Okay,
But there is some upland that's not restricted here.
well, just grab that microphone if you don't mind. You can pull it out, you can pull it right out, yeah.
Thanks. If you look to the entryway,
Yep,
that's in green, that is not part of the use restriction. And if you look at the, what is that, Ken, drainage? If you look at the drainage line to the, okay, if you look to, okay, if you look to the sewer line to the, what direction is it? To the west, there's a small piece of land there that's not part of the activity use restriction.
okay,
But in order to square off the lot, we included that in the lot subdivision.
right, okay. All right. So the sort of extension of the green towards the yellow, is that minimized at this point?
The extension of the green is exactly the dimensions of the use restriction.
Okay, yeah, because obviously the configuration of that is less than ideal, but if it's to further the, moving the other two lots forward faster, you know, then that seems to make sense. Okay, other questions for the applicant? Mr. Dukran?
Thanks. I just want to point out, Mr. Rhodes, this plan here doesn't quite match.
Sorry, can you just, sir, can you just take the microphone, just because otherwise he can't get you.
Sorry about that. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. This was an early diagram to kind of demonstrate the concept right in through here, and this is not part of the subdivision set. This line was better defined out in here.
Very good.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean, Steve, yeah. So the subdivision, the actual
Plat.
SD1 is
That,
It's really
that line on the diagram you folks had, that line, we early on thought this would be a good place for the line right through here.
right.
It, later definition said a little bit more on that lot.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, the early is just a diagram to show that we were trying to divide it away.
right.
For a question, regarding the public and emergency cross easement, that'll be required as a condition for passing this subdivision. It's kind of drawn quite, specific, in a manner that's quite specific to the arrangement of the lots, with curves and so on. I'm sure it's not final, but what kind of guiding parameters would be used to establish this as a condition for the approval? And like dimensions, for instance, and where it's located.
Hold on just a second, I was just putting a little more depth on that. Steve, I don't know exactly what the dimension would be. One of the early layouts we had for the some of the conceptual site plans that are still morphing very much. These were the main drives, towards the front of the properties, and the building pads and parking were going to be behind them. I would suggest that the minimum width of these drives on site should be about 26 foot clear as a minimum. And if we can do a little better with layout, that'd be fine. But I think much smaller than that. It doesn't define itself as a main corridor north-south through there. So, again, some of the alignments, we were just trying to show some soft curves. And then, again, here to the north, one of the things we're trying to do is get that drive and that main drive a little closer to the river and the adjacent rail corridor.
I think Mr. Dukran, did I pronounce that appropriately? That what we would do is propose a condition that would essentially say that there would be mandatory connectivity between the lots, and that the ultimate location would be at the discretion of the planning board when we came back for site plan on each lot.
Yeah, I don't, right, okay. Other questions of the applicant from the board? Mr. Peterson?
Could you please tell us the status of the contamination on this area?
Yeah, it's all been cleaned up except for what's remaining in the soils on the site in the activity use restriction area. And that area has restrictions on how deep we can excavate. We can't take any soils off of the site. But going forward, we have a full sign-off from DES, and it's a remedial action plan that's in place. The remedial action plan has been executed except for 30 years of monitoring.
Oh, which, it'll take 30 years to complete that. Thank you.
Other questions of the applicant? Okay. All right, I think we're all set
Thank you.
right now, anyway. At this time, I'd ask if there's anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern with the plan. Seeing none, I'd ask that, is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak in favor of the plan? Okay. Any other questions of the applicant or staff from the board prior to closing the hearing? Okay, I don't think so. All right. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing and move to the meeting. So we have in front of us essentially a 3-lot subdivision here. Obviously, there's some configuration complexity to the lots, but I think the applicant explained why that's the case. In my opinion, that seems reasonable. It doesn't look to me that we're making the other lots untenable or anything like that. So, anybody else have any comments they want to talk about in the meeting here?
Well, I brought up the cross-access easement.
Yeah.
Whereas we want to give as much flexibility to its location
Right.
and its dimensions. Mr. Valley will remember how often when, say you establish it for this site, one site that comes in,
Yeah.
and then if the other side comes along and they can't work with where the connection would be, it's too limited. So I wish there was some way that you can, have the language such that we can get them to work together.
Yeah.
We have several examples in the past where we weren't able to work out a proper cross-access easements between properties.
Yeah, it's pretty key, I think, on these 3 lots, because obviously Daniel Webster is traffic challenged.
Right, although I wonder, if we have more of an opportunity here in that, unlike some of those other scenarios where we've got, an existing development, and we're talking about a redevelopment on one lot, so we're saying, as part of this approval of this new lot, you have to work with them, but we don't necessarily have that condition on the other
Right.
owner here. I think we would have the opportunity to say, in each case, effectively, a condition as to each site plan.
Yeah. The problem is you'll probably just get one at a time. You might get the next
Right.
one a year later.
Right. I don't know, there's really no way to put easement requirements on
We do have
this
the,
time.
yeah,
Can we?
there is a condition in the plan now, which staff provided, which says the applicant should provide, provide a public and emergency cross easement access the full length of the property prior to any of the lots being sold or conveyed to different owners.
Right. So that might be as much as you can do at this point. I mean, I think it's certainly in the lot development and owner's best interest to connect them as well, because they'll get better flow on their, into and out of their sites than one way into, any one of those little single accesses is gonna get congested anyway. But, I don't know, is there anything further you think you could put into there? I'm up for talking about it. I'm not sure what to put in there. Maybe,
In case the rest, you just, like this, you just keep your fingers crossed that it'll work out.
any thoughts?
I mean, I don't know that there's much we'd add. I mean, I appreciate, Steve, your point about we might get one site plan, the next one, a year later or something, but at least we're in a circumstance where there's sort of, it's, virgin land, so to speak. I mean, there's no development anywhere, so it's not, again, a circumstance where we've got an existing development and we're saying, now we can't bind these guys after the fact. So at least I think we do have more of an opportunity here to sort of control going forward what the access looks like. I think this condition is probably about the best we could do, is to say, essentially you've got to provide for this easement, and it's got to be provided before the lots are sold, and it also says that it would be reviewed and approved by Corporation Council and planning staff, and then recorded. So it would run with the deeds to each of the lots. So I think that's pretty good.
Okay. Anybody else have any discussion on any of the parts? No? Anybody willing to entertain a motion?
Barley, I'll go ahead and make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve new business number 2, subdivision plan. Owners of Landing at Nashua LLC, proposed 3-lot subdivision located at 2 East Spitbrook Road. That is finding that the plan does meet the requirements outlined in subdivision NRO section 190-138G with a total of 5 stipulations. The first stipulation being a waiver request with respect to section 190-281D10, which requires physical features on site within 1,000 feet, and that stipulation shall read that the waiver is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation, and then stipulations 2 through 5 as written in the staff report.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve with the 5 stipulations as indicated by Mr. Varley. Any second on that? Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope to be back before you soon.
Thanks. Okay, new business site plan, case number 3, 711 West Hollow Street, owner. Application and acceptance of proposed site plan for construction of 4 single-family homes along with 1 existing home, totaling 5. Property is located at 711 West Hollow Street. Can I have a motion as to whether this application is ready for the board to take jurisdiction?
So moved.
Any second on it?
Second.
By Mr. Peterson. All those in favor?
Aye.
You didn't ask for,
Opposed?
you didn't ask for any discussion.
Oh, sorry, any discussion?
Any discussion?
No? Okay, motion passes. All right, Mr. Maynard, you're up for new business number 3.
Ready, Mr. Chairman?
I'm ready.
For the record, my name is Richard Maynard, I'm a licensed professional engineer with Maynard and Parkett Engineering of Nashua, representing the property owners and applicant, 711 West Hollow Street Realty Trust LLC. The property of concern is a 1.42 acre or 62,000 square foot parcel at 711 West Hollow Street in the R9 zone. It is also known as Sheet F, Lot 54, containing one existing residential house. On December 13, 2016, the ZBA granted a variance to allow 5 principal structures on the lot with a 22-foot private common driveway and a stipulation that the side lot setbacks be 20 foot instead of the 10-foot required called for under the zoning regs. The site is served by city water, city sewer, and gas. Drainage will be handled by several leach and catch basins. The existing topography generally drains halfway each way to the east and west. Some goes towards West Hollow Street and half goes to the back of the property. With the proposed design of all the drainage from the T-turnaround and the roof drains for the houses, numbers 5 and 6, most will drain now towards West Hollow Street. Trash will be at curbside with standard city trash containers. The staff report lists 3 waivers to be considered. The first is for underground utilities. The second is for parking. Under the site plan regs, the max parking is 1.9 spaces per unit, which would call for a total of 9.5 spaces. We would like to provide 2 spaces for each of the 5 units, plus 5 visitor spaces, one of which will be designated for handicap parking. The third waiver is for the width of the private common driveway. The 22-foot width was approved by the ZBA, and the 22-foot width is acceptable to the fire department, and engineering had no particular concerns. With regard to the stipulations, stipulation number 13 needs some adjustments. The as-built plan is by a licensed land surveyor, not an engineer. And then the engineer shall certify to the completion of the work in accordance with the site plan. And the stip says subdivision plan. This is a site plan. The third-party engineer does not design the street and driveways, or they are as approved on these plans. There's no changes to that. And then my question is, why does it have to be a third-party engineer? There's recently been a new RSA passed, which just recently, it's Senate Bill 152, and it essentially says, a planning board that requires third-party inspection during the construction process shall develop a scope for the project inspections and solicit proposals from 3 or more qualified firms and select the lowest bidder that meets the requirements outlined in the request for a proposal. So this third-party engineer seems to be premature. I would suggest that you designate the design engineer, which would be my firm, to do the inspections, and therefore that we would not be considered a third party, and you still could get inspections to make sure they're built according to the city regs. This is what's been done in the past on other projects like this. So, and then, so down the road, several months from now, after the planning board has figured out how to handle these third-party inspections according to the Senate bill, then we can go back to that kind of stipulation, if the board so wants. This hasn't been the past practice. You've always designated the design engineer to do inspections of these sort, and it's worked fine in the city. With regard to stipulation number 10, I just want to make sure that it's clear that the contractor can start the road and drainage construction prior to issuance of any building permits. The bond would be for the completion of the work prior to the issuance of any building permit, just as this is done for any typical residential subdivision. So, if you first read that stip, it would imply that the entire project from square one had to be bonded, but the developer contract has the ability to start the road and do the drainage work and then bond the project before getting any building permits. And that's been the practice in most projects, including subdivisions. So, and with that, I would suggest the board consider that. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing.
Yep.
I spoke to 2 abutters. I didn't get their names, but they've now left, and they're fairly comfortable. One is in the project to the rear, and the other one's down the street on West Hollow Street. And they both looked at the plan, asked me a few questions, and they're comfortable with the project. So I would suggest, unless somebody comes out and says something, that at least 2 of the abutters are comfortable with the plan. Thank you.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
No questions yet, but Mr. Chair, Mr. Miller ran through a number of changes he'd like to see in the stipulations. I think we'll have to take them one by one, review them carefully. I kind of missed much of what he was,
Yeah, I can-
proposing.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll agree to go back over them. I went fast, just to get the basics up down.
Let's start with number 10. That was the one that you was talking about, the roads and drainage being allowed prior, right?
Prior to the issuance of the building permit.
Prior to issue of building permit,
Well,
the bond for it.
if you read that, you can't tell what it's talking about. It implies that the entire project from square one has to be bonded. The practice has been on other projects that at some point before you get building permits, you have to bond the completion of the project. And if this were a regular standard subdivision, you would be building drainage and street up to the base course before you bonded the remainder, and then you could get building permits. So the whole point is that it allows the contractor to get started, and the city's covered and everybody else is covered in that no building permits are being issued. Meanwhile, the project's being started and it's being inspected. So that's, on most projects, if not all projects, that's been the procedure. I just want to, that's a clarification. It doesn't quite say it in that stipulation either way.
So if I understand you correctly, it's not the prior to issuance of the building permit, it's that, it's the list of things for which you'd be providing a guarantee, the pavement, drainage, site landscaping. You're saying your view of what the normal practice would be is that you could begin doing some of the paving and drainage infrastructure before you've provided the guarantee?
Well, point is a clarification, because it doesn't say either way. But road construction should be able to be started regardless of bonding. But you can't have a building permit until you've bonded the completion of the project, which has been the typical procedure. The stipulation doesn't address that either way. You could read it in two different directions. So I would suggest that the road would be allowed to be started and no building permits issued until it was the remainder of the project is bonded, which is similar to the other stipulation that's in there. Stipulation number
11. 11,
11 is similar to that, but it's not quite the same, and it's a sort of slightly different purpose. It's best that you finish the houses while there's still only a base course of pavement, and then after the houses are finished, then you put the final surface course. Otherwise, you get a beat-up driveway, so it's addressing a slightly different matter.
You mean a beat-up street?
Huh?
You said driveway, but you meant street. You said driveway, but you meant street.
No, I mean driveway all the way, Steve.
Oh, you mean driveway.
This is a private driveway on a site plan. Staff will disagree with me, but it's a site plan, not a city street, and it's a private driveway.
but your concern with stipulation number 11 was really the third-party component. It didn't have anything to do with the rest of the...
Okay, yeah, and in 11, the RSA, which I'll read it again to you, that recently passed, says, "A planning board that requires third-party inspection during the construction process shall develop a scope of work for the project inspection, solicit proposals from 3 or more qualified firms, and select the lowest bidder that meets the requirements outlined in the request for proposal." So the RSA says the planning board got to have a scope of work, got to get competitive proposals, and then pick the lowest one. That's not what it says in that stip. The stip says the city engineer's office will select a third-party engineer regardless of the cost, regardless of competitive proposals, et cetera, so.
What's the statutory provision that you're looking at?
It says, the one I got, says this act shall take effect 60 days after its passage, so.
Right, but what, I'm saying, what,
What number?
you're looking at the actual, the
It's an
bill?
RSA number?
This is, I'm not as familiar with that kind of stuff.
Right, so I mean, yeah, so this is if this is a bill from this session, it hasn't passed yet.
But anyway, that's what the legislature is considering for a new RSA, so I wanted the board to be aware of that, so.
Right.
But regardless of that, I wanted to understand why the design engineer can't be designated as the inspecting party. Why do you have to go to third-party engineers, regardless of their cost, regardless of their expertise? The design engineer should know his own project and be able to certify to that. And, not to brag, but a firm like Manning and Paquette's been practicing in the city for 40 years. I'm sure we're qualified enough to do inspections.
Okay, so that's your concern with number 11. Number 13, you just had concern.
Well, it should be a licensed land surveyor that does the as-built plan, not an engineer. That's just
Well, that's, yeah,
yeah, it's just,
that's, but you, land surveyor, and you think the wording should also,
is fine.
should also be
Site.
site plan, not subdivision.
correct.
That's the only issue you have there, okay. So those are the three stipulations that you have comment on.
Yeah, in general, there's nothing wrong with them, they just need to be worded better and differently and corrected.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant? So just for my own clarification, the parking, so you've got these 1, 2,
5.
3, 4, 5 spaces there. And I guess the intent is because there's no parking on the street in this, because of the width.
Correct, and it's a good practice anywhere in projects such as this to have,
Yeah.
because if this was a multifamily buildings and stuff, we'd have designated parking lots.
Right.
You know, and although technically you could probably squeeze 3 or 4 cars adjacent to each house, it would be better regulated if they went into the visitor parking and went there.
Other questions of the applicant? Mr.
Yes.
Peterson?
With the 5 houses, so each one would have one of the trash bins out by the road on collection day?
Every house will have its own individual trash bin.
But at the house or out on West Hollow Street?
No, on Teresa Way, at their driveway.
Oh, that's good.
Mr. Dukran?
Following up on that, so these are condominiums.
This project is going to be sold to a third-party developer. That hasn't been determined at this point. At a minimum, it'll be a homeowners, at a minimum, it'll be a homeowners association, but likely it'll be a condo, but I can't say that for sure until whomever wants to buy this decides how they want to handle this.
Mr. Peterson?
So the fire department, they approved the turnaround for their apparatus to
That's
come in there
correct.
and...
They made us expand it.
and-
They have some huge trucks.
I mean,
I'm not sure they're, I'm not going to argue with them on the size of their trucks, but it now accommodates a 45-foot-long fire truck.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dukran?
I just have a quick
Go right ahead,
question.
go right ahead.
Ms.
Where
Harper?
this is a private drive, who's going to be policing the no parking and enforcing that?
Excuse me?
Where this is a private drive,
Yes.
who's going to be enforcing the no parking on the main drive?
Same people that enforce no parking in supermarket parking lots and in the fire zone and things like that. It's totally enforceable, because even though it's a private drive, it's open to the general public, and therefore it falls into that nebulous half-public, half-private enforceable thing, so it can be enforced by as a fire violation, just like the fire lane and the handicap spaces, et cetera, in private parking lots, which are truly open to the public, so they're quasi-public.
So in addition to the signs, will there be a designated fire lane marked on the drive?
No, because they only want the signs, they don't want the bars. Nobody renews those, they wear out and they're gone in a few years. They want permanent signs that say no parking.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dukran?
Yeah, something more specific on the plan. I'm looking at a grading plan.
Drawing number 3.
Yeah. And, you know, our plan isn't very clear. I guess the copying wasn't that good. But, looks like, looking to the northeast, where you have that retaining wall,
Want to have the what?
a retaining wall.
Yeah.
Looks like it's graded towards the wall. And where's that runoff going to end up? Is it going to end up on the neighbor's property?
Mr. Dukran is asking about the retaining wall in this vicinity, right here.
Yep.
That land already, if you notice the contour, already goes that way. The high point of the entire property is here. All of this goes in that particular direction. What's going to happen here is the drainage from this point here will go to that T and be infiltrated into the ground. Some of it will eventually reach the neighboring property, but it'll be less than what goes there today. There's a full drainage report on this, Steve.
Yeah, I kind of went through it. I didn't, I was a little concerned about it, because I'm looking at the section, the cross-section on the wall, and it's pretty flat across, and the wall is higher than the ground by about a foot or so. So, I don't know what, I don't see any drainage to capture that, any pipe or catch basin, so.
You're talking behind the wall on the
On the
hillside.
upside, yeah,
On the upside, there's a leach and catch basin right here,
yes.
and then there's perforated pipe going either direction, so that the entire, any drainage that comes from the middle of this T and from this driveway goes in there. So I'm not sure what your
I
question
think he's
is.
talking about the other side of the wall, like the.
Over here?
The cross-section seems to indicate that the grade comes down to the wall.
No, this is the roadway on top here. This is the wall.
Okay.
This is the perforated drain, and this is the existing ground that already exists there that's reasonably steep. I'm not sure I'm answering your question,
yeah.
but.
Well, again, the plan isn't clear, so I'm trying to,
Our plan's not as clear as yours.
Oh, I'm
It's a
sorry.
little, it's a little
It-
fuzzy, so it's hard to tell even which side of the wall is what.
okay. So, right,
Yeah.
I guess I understand what you're saying. So the wall is not at the property line.
No, far away.
Yeah.
It's probably 40 feet from the property line, Steve.
Okay.
But you're still grading down to the,
Well, the road will go down to this, but the grades already exist.
On the back side of the
Go
wall.
on the backside, going down there steep. There's some, anywhere from 15 to 25 feet difference in elevation from our site to the property in the rear. So we're staying away from those steeper slopes that are along our property line.
right, and it seems that you're making it a bit steeper.
No, we're in some sections correct. The contour goes like this, and we're squaring it across. Yes, I suppose you could say it's making it somewhat steeper, yes.
Okay, but not steep enough that it needs special
No,
protection.
it's still like 5 to 1, 6 to 1 type of slope at its most extreme. And for the rest of the borderline on slopes, we usually want to say 3 to 1 on 3 as the steepest. Here is like 1 on 6, double the minimum suggested slope on this type of construction.
Okay. I wanted to bring up an issue I think that you have on West Hollis Street. It turns out that West Hollis Street was repaved in 2016. So you have a plan to cut into a street that has a 5-year moratorium. It was required by city ordinance that approval to cut the excavator moratorium street needs to be obtained from the Board of Public Works.
And nobody informed us of that, Steve, but okay, I hear you. I understand the policy.
Wanna grab that mic?
Hold the mic, he says.
So we'll have to put that in as a condition that they appear before the Board of Public Works. I have to caution you, there will be no guarantee that they will approve it. And it is possible that this plan may have to be constructed after the 5-year moratorium is up.
I hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Where are the lines in West Hollis? How close to the neck are they?
Well, this existing sewer is in the middle of West Hollis. The rest of the lines are all along the gutter line.
There's no existing stubs?
The existing stuff to the house is way too small,
Okay,
and it's,
too far down. Yeah.
no, it's too old probably
Cool, yeah.
to be reutilized. It's probably only a 4-inch,
Right.
whereas we need at least an 8-inch.
All right, well, that's just a condition.
Yes.
Can you talk about, where would snow on this site, if they're plowing it, it's gonna go, some of it maybe to the back of the parking area and then
Well,
down the bottom
It's
left?
gonna go in here, it's gonna go in here,
Yeah,
it's gonna go over here.
right,
This is not a lot of, relatively speaking, when you guys ask that kind of question, this is not a ton of snow. This is a private driveway, and we're gonna have little piles along the driveway. This is not like a big parking lot where you have, to this day, there's still big hills. So there's
Okay.
plenty of room to put snow on this site.
okay. And I don't know if I missed it or I couldn't see it, the intent of the sort of lighting along the, is it, on the street, is it on
No,
the
there's no
property?
street lighting. The only lights are at the front door of the houses.
Just the front door, and nothing around the parking or anything?
No, nothing over here. There's no, this site's pretty open. When you travel there, there's a lot of light coming from West Hollis Street. This doesn't need any supplemental lighting other than on the houses themselves. So there are no lighting standards out here
Okay,
proposed.
all right, and just because our plan's not super, it's a little fuzzy,
I
is there a
understand.
is there a hydrant up?
Yes.
Yeah.
A hydrant is right here in this location.
Okay, thanks.
So I think we have to settle this issue. Is it a driveway or is it a drive, a private drive? Street, a private street,
Hmm.
because that makes a difference.
What's the distinction?
Well, private streets have to be constructed to this city standards unless waived by this board.
Right,
And driveways do not.
And driveway is a driveway.
I mean, we have as a condition now that it would be constructed to city standards.
No, they're seeking a waiver.
Not correct. It's a private driveway with pavement thicknesses in the
Number
detail
3.
sheets.
number 3 is the,
Okay, sorry.
yeah, it kind of reads like it over here, but not on the
Yeah.
number 3.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I
Sure.
believe each of the units has their own driveway that then go onto a private street, and they're gonna be addressed off of that private street.
Yeah, I thought
It's not a drive.
I thought
in
number
that
3
sense.
was just a waiver for the width.
Set all standards.
Well, I mean, we can
If I may,
waive
Mr.
whatever we
Chairman.
want, but,
But, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I thought when you said you were requesting the waiver, number 3, that you said you were requesting it specifically with respect to the width.
Well, it's already been designated a private driveway by the zoning board in their approval. As part of their approval, this would be a private 22-foot wide common driveway. That was acceptable to the fire department with the signage on the street, and the engineering didn't express any particular concerns. It is staff's interpretation that this is a private street. And my point to them is, this is a site plan. This is a driveway on a site plan, like any other site plan with driveways leading from the public street in towards the units, towards the multifamily buildings, towards the parking lots. They're all driveways. This is not a street. This is a driveway, shared in common. And that's our position. Staff doesn't agree.
so, Mr. Maynard, on sheet 4, you have the section and the construction detail for the common drive. Can you explain to me what part of that section is inconsistent with a street construction? Like, is it the thickness of the base course, is it the width of the shoulder, or what, you know, what's the difference between what you're showing here and what you would show if this was a private street?
All right. It is good practice when you have driveways that'll have,
On sheet 4,
Yeah,
top
like-
left, yeah,
I don't know where I put sheet 4.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have a copy if you want. That one's clear.
How did I do it?
Can read that one.
Well, somehow or other, think I lost sheet 4. Oh, no, I got it, all right.
Yeah. So that detail there,
Now-
how would that differ if this was a
That's-
private street?
The difference is neither here nor there. The fact that you have the same vertical thicknesses and subgrades
Yeah.
of a common driveway versus a city street is just good engineering practice to want to have something constructed to a good standard. So whether it's a driveway or a full city street, you use the same standards. Now, typically, if it was a everyday cheap, I'll call it cheap, whether driveway, you would only have 3 inches of pavement. This particular one has 4 inches of pavement.
Okay,
And it has 16 inches of base. Typically, a driveway, a cheap driveway would only have like 6 inches of gravel base. So the point being is, this is built to a little higher standard so that it'll last and won't fall apart, and have to be repaired and fixed every 5 to 10 years. This is a driveway that'll last 20 to 30 years, or more.
Are you proposing to build it, though, to the same standards that would apply to a private street?
No, that's a,
Wait, let me ask it a different way.
That's an erroneous-
What is it you're requesting a waiver from in item number 3?
that this would be considered a private driveway, 22 feet wide.
Okay, but that's,
And
so,
I'm not requesting that waiver. The staff insists that I have to request that waiver. I think I already got approved.
okay, but again, you know, this says
The method of
minimum
cons-
design standards for private streets. So are you requesting a waiver from the width requirement only, or something
Yes.
else?
I don't, the waiver, I'm not me. It's not, you know,
I understand what you're saying.
you're doing typical lawyer things, framing the question like a lawyer, and which you are. Staff insisted I put that waiver in.
I understand that.
My position is.
Right.
That we have been approved by zoning board and accepted by fire, and no comment from engineering for a 22-foot road, driveway. And that's my position. I did not think I needed to ask for this waiver.
Understood, but what we're trying to get is practically, what is the difference? And if you're saying that the only difference is the width, then that helps us understand. what-
yeah, I wanna know what
Practicality, correct. The only difference is the width, 22 feet, because the vertical dimensions are just good engineering practice.
But is it like curbs or
There's
like,
no curbs here.
right, would the street would have curbs, is
We
that?
have let me just run through what the street would have.
Yeah,
It'll be a 28-foot wide street.
right, we know that's the width, yeah.
Right, you'll have curbs,
Curbs,
you'll have sidewalks,
sidewalk,
you'll have your underground utilities spaced out in a certain fashion,
right,
right?
yep,
So, and then you will have lighting that somebody raised before.
yep,
All of those things aren't being met by this proposed plan, so,
And that applies whether it's a public street or a private
or
street.
private street, yes.
right. Okay, so in practicality, let me summarize, and if you agree with me, how I'm interpreting this, that the difference between, because you're gonna construct it to this plan anyway, because it is a site plan.
No
that's
matter
part of
what,
the plan,
correct.
is that there aren't gonna be any curbs, it's gonna be narrower, and it's not gonna have lighting,
It's not gonna what?
have lighting.
I don't know what lighting's got to do with anything, but,
Is that accurate, what I just said?
Well,
that's correct, but, it's not the lighting part is not relevant,
Whatever, but, yeah,
but
okay. I mean, we can discuss it, Stephen, yeah.
yeah, I think this is not unlike what we heard earlier today, you know. A difference of opinion between what staff's saying is required by our, you know, standard procedures and regulations,
Yeah,
the early item, so.
right, yeah.
But at the same point, maybe at a point where we can table this one for another opinion, legal opinion, unless you already had it.
Well, I think Mr. Varley has a question.
Yeah, I had a related question. This goes back to the condo issue. Mr. Bader, I know you said that you don't yet know, you know, what the new owner of the property, how they would characterize this, but I guess it seems to me that the way this is being presented as a site plan, it would by definition have to be a condo.
no, definitely not.
What other form of ownership would it be then?
Homeowners Association,
But a homeowners association as part of a condo, I mean, if,
it can be a rental. They're very much different. Homeowners Association condos and a rental property are three different forms that this could take.
right, but I mean, typically, if you had a homeowners association, the individual owners would still own the land on which their house sits. There would be common areas that would be owned by, you know, that would be maintained by the homeowners association, but that's different than single ownership.
Correct,
Anyway,
it's not a
single
single ownership, no, but,
Right, so it's not, so I'm just saying a homeowners association is not a form of ownership.
oh, yes, it is.
Well, it's not, but, okay.
All right, fine.
So, I guess then,
Tell all those homeowners association that they don't own their property then.
it's not a form of ownership for the individual owner. They own common areas.
They own it in common, yes, correct.
No, but they don't own all the land in
The
common.
house is designated,
Right? This is a single lot, right? No, the houses that sit on this
Adam.
lot, they don't own land.
when you have a homeowners association, the house is designated to individuals. The land is owned totally in common, and there are no limited common areas.
If it's a condo form of ownership, yes.
It's a homeowners association.
So,
When there's a condo, there is limited common areas and general common areas. Adam, I'm doing it, you know, I'm not to be insulting, but I don't think you practice real estate law.
Okay, I just have a question for staff. I just want to understand if, as the plan is presented, Mr. Maynard is suggesting, you know, this could be rental units. Could you have 4 rental units on the site plan like this without it being, you know, a condo form of ownership?
I suppose it's possible, if it's under one ownership and someone rents them. You could have a condominium that is owned by essentially one owner and with several units on it, and that one owner can rent them. That's typically how a lot of condo projects, if it's a slow market, they rent their units out. Some of the larger condominiums, like Ledgewood Hills, did that initially towards the tail end of a market in the end of the 80s. But what Mr. Maynard is saying here, this is what we would consider a private street, because the fire department, for fire purposes and other addressing purposes, it comes off, each of these units come off of a private street, and they each have their own driveways. You don't name driveways. If each of these units was addressed off of West Hollis Street, then he might have an argument, but they are not. That's not the way the fire department wanted these to be labeled and addressed to meet their requirements, so they could safely provide emergency response.
I disagree, that's not what the fire
Well,
department
you can
said.
disagree, Richard, but, you know, there again, where do you want to go? This is, we handled a project just up the street, just like this, and we had no issues with it, but you seem to have an issue with a lot of the different requirements. The board has ordinances, they don't have regulations.
Okay,
Roger, just one other follow-up question. For a condo, would would the planning staff typically require submission of the condo docs?
Yes.
Yes.
One of the conditions of approval is that they have to submit the homeowners association documents, because we looked at it as a private street, and the homeowners association would be responsible for taking care of that. So that is a requirement. It's number 9.
Right, yeah, I just asked, because that could be distinct from the
Correct.
condo docs themselves.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, there's another form of ownership also, 99-year land leases. But anyway, that's not very practical nowadays, but it's done.
Okay. Other questions of the applicant?
I know we're beating this to death, but I just want to state what I think is true, and you tell me if you believe it. It's going to be called Teresa Way, but it'll be a private road owned by the people who live there, and each house will have its own property, yet there'll be common land that they'll all be mutually responsible for, like the road and the shared parking, that guest parking. But each landowner will own their house and their little plot of land, but there'll be a community or a homeowners association-owned roadway, and that'll be Teresa Way.
They won't own their plot of land, though, that's the thing, it's just one lot.
It's all one lot, not 5 lots.
Yes, if it's a homeowners association, it's one big lot. Further to this, the fire department has said that we can't use addresses on West Hollow Street. We want to use addresses on this driveway. Therefore, we have to, under the 911 rules and regs, we have to give it a name, and then we can assign addresses on a named driveway, or a named way, whatever you want to say. We did ask to name this 711, give it an address of 711 West Hollow Street, 711A, B, C, D, or 711-1, -2, -3, -4. They said no, under the 911 rules. You have to give this driveway a name, and we'll give it addresses on this driveway. It's very discretionary. It's not discretionary in the way the fire department has to apply the 911 rules and regulations. So this is arbitrarily, driveway is given a name just for 911 purposes. Otherwise, it'd all have 711 West Hollow Street addresses, you know, -A, -B, or -1, -2, which is what we had in the beginning. So I'm not totally familiar with 911 rules and regs, but that's what the fire department explained to us when we went through this. But it is a driveway. The fire department recognized that it's a driveway, not a road.
Well, number 12,
So there's no curbs.
No curbs.
Is there a reason why you want no curbs, other than it doesn't cost as much?
Other than it detracts, as far as I'm concerned, on a project such as this, it detracts from the project itself. There are many subdivisions in this city where there are no curbs. The lawn goes right to the edge of the street pavement, and they're perfectly acceptable. In fact, some of them are better neighborhoods don't have sidewalks and don't have curbs. I happen to live in one.
What's the benefit of no curb?
One, they're not necessary. It's an unnecessary expense. They don't provide anything in this particular situation.
Well, I mean, but the benefit of not having it is just less cost. I mean, obviously the benefit of having it was we can plow it
It is
better
a
and
more
stuff.
attractive project. The second benefit is less cost.
Okay.
But the curbs in this type of situation don't provide any benefit.
Other questions?
I'd like some more, I've heard several times that the zoning board approved a 22-foot driveway.
That's right in their approval note. The wording, if you look at note, whatever it is on the plan, that's exactly what the zoning board approved.
Well, we have minutes of the zoning board as well as the approval letter. Can't find that.
In the approval letter, what the applicant has requested is a variance to exceed the maximum principal structures permitted on one lot. That's what they approved. Mr. Maynard is correct. In his minutes, he does talk about it being a private drive.
Their approval actually said on a 22-foot common driveway. It said that. I don't happen to have it right with me.
But what the zoning board is approving is the principal, how many principal structures on the lot.
And I can find that, and if it is mentioned during this
You did
discourse
mention in
that-
there, I did see that in his discussion, that he did call it a driveway.
Right,
But
that
we
doesn't
also
mean that they're
have,
approving, it means that it was mentioned, it's not an issue for them, so did they approve it or did they not approve it? To me, if it's
They-
just mentioned, doesn't mean that it's approved.
I beg to differ. The zoning board approves more than 5 units on a lot. They also look at the layout and make designations such as the side setbacks would be 20 feet instead of 10. They are making comments on the proposal before them as laid out. So it's not only the number of houses, it's the width of the driveway, and it's the setbacks of the homes. So they do approve more than just that basic thing that you alluded to.
Mr. Chair, I can point out on page 8 of the zoning board minutes where Mr. Maynard is stating to the zoning board, is making statements to the zoning board and referring to road width. So, more than in one occasion on that page.
Okay.
This client's not gonna make this decision, just say, approve it as in staff. Primary bond. Cannot represent.
Any other questions? The applicant? No? Okay. All right. Okay, I think we're all set for this time. Anybody wishing to speak in opposition or concern to this plan? Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the plan? Hearing none, any other questions for the applicant or the staff? No, we're in the, as we're still in the hearing. None?
Mr. Chair?
Okay. Yep.
I just wanted to say that on stipulation number 13, Mr. Maynard is correct, it should read site plan, not subdivision plan.
Right.
Stipulation number 10, I know Mr. Maynard was concerned about the interpretation of it. This is a standard stipulation that we use that just requires the applicant, before they start any work, just to make sure that they get their bond in place. It's not going to prevent them from moving forward as long as their bond is in place, like doing the road work.
Right.
And it is a typical stipulation. On December 1st, 2016, the board approved a similar project for Rise Homes, which is right down the road from there. That was a stipulation, as were the other stipulations in there. I believe he also had a similar private road in there, and that was also approved in the staff report as written.
Okay.
You know, we've had some contradictions, even in Mr. Maynard's waiver request. He also refers to it, I think, as a road or a street. The fire department has it in their email as a 22-foot wide road.
Right.
So, you know, we did look at it as a road, which is why we had some of the other conditions of approval, why they needed a waiver from design standards for a private street. So those were just some of the reasons why we looked at it as a private street.
Okay. Other questions for staff while we still have the hearing open? No? Okay. At this point, I'll close the public hearing and move into the meeting. All right, so we talked about a bunch of different things. The stipulation adjustments. Seems like number 10 is really just what gets bonded when. That's my understanding. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that Mr. Maynard had a different interpretation, but I don't understand why you wouldn't have the bond in place before you do any work. It seems to me only natural that you would say, before you start paving streets and doing landscaping work, you would have the bond in place, not you can do that, some of that work first and then get the bond, which I thought was what Mr. Maynard was suggesting.
Okay. The third party, Steve, what's your opinion on third party versus design engineer on number 11? Street inspection? The street inspection?
I thought I'd heard about the Senate bill going through.
Yep.
Right, so this is a.
That's a proposed.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor provided, this is Senate Bill 152. I mean, I don't have, obviously, all the detail here, although I could look to see what it is, but I mean,
Yeah.
this, it wouldn't, this is not something that's passed yet, because bills in the Senate and the House haven't crossed over to the other house yet, so at most, it's been approved by the Senate.
Yeah.
So it would still have to be
Oh, so
approved by the House, signed by the
Still
governor.
pending, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But is that consistent with that, it allows designers to inspect the street their own?
I mean, it doesn't specifically say, it's the current language is a planning board approval of a subdivision plat, site plan, or other land use application may require the applicant to reimburse the board for expenses reasonably incurred by obtaining third-party inspection during the construction process. So it doesn't say third party.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's not clear, though, if third party means, I don't know that that necessarily means it couldn't be the design engineer. I think it means not the applicant.
Right. But a licensed engineer.
Right, so, if the staff is recommending that we hire a third party, I think there are reasons why that's been recommended. Often we are unable to get on the same page with the design. You bring that into the construction, we will probably end up with a bad product altogether. So having a third party would probably guarantee us, something that this city and the applicant will be satisfied with, and we don't have problems
Okay.
like we often do.
Yeah.
I would like to comment on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Peterson.
I think the idea to have a third party is to have an independent opinion on the scope and the design and the cost of the project, as well as the viability of the design. And the reason why I think we are now proposing that independent voice is, for example, in today's news, there's the airplanes that keep crashing, and the FAA allowed the airplane manufacturer to do the design, review, testing, inspection, and approval. And then what happened? There was no independent testing of, that feature of the plane, and now they're paying the price for it. So there's a reason behind having a third party review these things.
Yeah, the wording is a little weird to me because it's talking about design. you know, but, you know, obviously at completion of construction, the design's already gone by, you know? So, I mean, is anybody else's reading of this is,
Now,
it's a third-party review of the as-installed condition against the design? Like, I don't think there's a lot of practicality of reviewing something that's been constructed for its design. Because at that point, you're going to dig it back up if it's, if there's an issue, you know? So this, Mike, to me, doesn't look like a peer review of the design. It's a review, you know.
It's basically confirming that the construction was done correctly in accordance with the design
With
plan.
the design. So, I mean, that's my understanding of maybe what the intent of this is, but can staff speak to that? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
As a clerk.
So this is a review of the construction as
Yes.
constructed.
I was gonna ask actually about the RSA, I mean, because the wording says during construction, as opposed to this where it says upon completion.
Yeah.
And this actually, Mr. Chair, goes hand in hand with what we have talked about regarding private streets before. When work is being done on public streets, the engineering office is able, for the most part, to provide inspectors.
Right.
And we don't have the resources to do it on private sites or private streets. But because we are required for private streets to meet the same standards, design and construction, it's important to have that third party. And I know the applicant's engineer is suggesting that the design engineer is the best person to do that. It might be best cost-wise, but it's not necessarily best quality of construction-wise.
Okay. But would you agree with me, Steve, that the wording here, where it says, if third-party, licensed professional engineer certifying the private street and driveways were designed and installed as required?
Yes,
by-
if you remove the words designed and make that installed,
Yeah,
I think that's what we're trying to achieve.
yeah, were installed
installed.
as required by,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
it kind of needs a little wording. I think it needs to say something like, the licensed professional engineer certifying the private street and driveways were installed in accordance with design. In accordance with the design. So you'd say, upon completion of construction, the applicant shall provide the city engineer with a written certification signed by, I'd say signed by a
Third party,
party licensed professional engineer selected by, certifying the private street and driveways were installed in accordance with the design or the approved,
Approved design.
site plan documents, you know. It's just a little bit of rewording there, but I think that would get the intent of that. But third party versus
design engineer.
design engineer. I could go either way on that, frankly.
I will go along with staff's recommendation.
For clarification.
Yep.
We have an ordinance here, and the stipulation pretty much follows the city ordinance in terms of language on that.
Yeah,
That's why that condition's written the way it is.
yeah,
So it does follow city ordinance.
right. But the intent, as you understand it, is
Right.
to have a review of the as-constructed condition.
Right, if I may, for further clarification only, Engineer Dukran is correct, that they don't have the resources, and we've had issues in the past with some private condominium or private development streets where they didn't have inspections on them. And we ended up after the fact dealing with them and the new owners that were complaining to the city about the quality of the work that was done by the developer at the time. So you have issues with those things if they aren't inspected. I think the word design is their design originally, but then the inspection, they inspected to make sure it follows the appropriate design that was completed by the design engineer.
Right.
Assuming, we also review the design in our engineering department as well when it comes in, when you approve the site plan. Like this site plan's design would have been looked at and reviewed by the city engineer's office.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just trying to get at not having a third-party engineer come and review the design after something's been constructed. 'Cause that
Well,
just
it
sets up
should be
a
done
condition.
during the process, not, you know, it has to be done during certain stages. The city engineer's office has a process where they inspect public streets as they're constructed to make sure that they comply with the city's, or the Board of Public Works design specification for public streets, whether they're being built by a private,
Yeah.
you know, by a subdivider, or whether it being built in this particular case. But we don't inspect those, and so
Right,
that's why we need a third-party engineer or an inspector to inspect them that's approved by the city engineer's office.
okay.
That's not meaning to say if the city engineer's office wants to use a design engineer and they feel comfortable with it, that they could make that approval, but that would be up to the city engineer's office to make that decision. I hope that clarifies it. It's a kind of a,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to understand if this is a design affidavit or a construction control affidavit or both. So,
Yeah, maybe the ordinance itself, the wording probably needs a
yeah.
little bit of cleanup,
But
you know.
your opinion is that we need a construction control affidavit, yeah, certification, okay, all right. I mean, the city engineers already looked at the design that's on the documents. That's already gone
To
through.
the extent possible. There are elements in the design that,
Sure.
that the city engineer can't, doesn't have a capability of doing, like, for instance, say the retaining wall exceeds
Right,
a 4-foot height,
right,
you know,
right.
something like that.
But typically like a road cross-section, then we look at that.
Yes.
Yeah. So practically speaking, it seems to me the only thing being proposed here is really a narrower street that doesn't have curbs. Would you agree, Steve, that the detail on the one that I pointed out is generally conforms to a city's,
Well, I got to point out that it's funny
Yeah.
that when you see a cross-section like this,
yeah,
which is pretty much what we have in the city under the public works standards
right,
for a cross-section across a roadway,
yeah,
it says typical common driveway cross-section. The reason why they say driveway is because if you look at the two sides,
yeah,
you see where the driveway ramps are?
yeah,
Those are what the driveways are. What's in the middle is really the cross-section of the road, the street.
yeah,
So it is essentially trying to achieve what a street should be.
yeah,
Dimensionally, it's not the same as public street like we talked about before.
with, right,
I also want to point out, this could very well be an error by the engineer. It does point to a sloped granite curb, 7-inch reveal. That must be an error.
yeah, it doesn't really, there's no, I didn't see any curb details, but, or no curb on this, indicated on the plan though, right? But it does have that, yeah. Okay, so you think that would be the only,
Well, so indeed, if we are going to,
I mean, we're approving this plan, so,
if we are going to give the request, the waiver to, request for waiver, number 3, because the board recognizes that this is a private street, we probably need to identify what standards we are waiving.
well, in the past, we've said with, with dimension only, or something. We've added words like that before, I remember specifically on
But here,
several ones where we've used that waiver,
but here we're talking about more than that. We're talking
because
about
that, 19211B, that's the whole,
the whole thing, right?
that's the whole section,
So we're,
but I think, if I remember right.
so we said with lighting, curbing, sidewalks. I mean, that would be, those are the 4 areas.
Okay. I think those are probably most important areas.
Right, we could be specific in there, and these are the only things we're waiving.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah. With curbing,
Lighting, sidewalks.
lighting, sidewalks. That would keep the cross-section consistent with city standards, at least,
And-
base course.
And do we want to waive lighting? It's 5
Yeah.
units.
I mean, the lighting to me always, like, it's gonna be one owner here, I mean, it's gonna be a value issue to the people that are on the street,
Well, you do not know it's one owner. It could turn out to be 5 owners.
could be, but if they feel like that street's dark and it's gonna lower the value of, frankly, I think, you know. It is one way to look at it, yeah.
I have been to
Yeah.
condominiums, larger condominiums that they don't have lighting and they count on people turning on their lights while you're not obligated to leave the light on all night, right?
No,
And
yeah,
then you have a dark,
yeah,
dangerous, unsafe street.
right.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could stipulate at least one pole light, you
Yeah.
know, at the parking.
Parking
you
area
know,
where
I
the
don't know.
handicap parking is. And
Yeah, the only thing I would say is it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that,
Yeah,
you know, then you have potentially impact on abutters, right? I mean, maybe not a lot,
Well,
given this, where
well,
they're situated, but.
once you introduce exterior lighting, then the standards for lighting need to be complied with,
right. Which would have the cutoff and that.
yes.
Okay, what other people?
With respect to stipulation number 9,
Yep,
I would just suggest that we add language in there that would say, you know, in addition to the homeowners association documents, condo documents as applicable.
yeah,
Because if it is gonna be a condo, then,
Yeah.
then the city should receive the condo documents and review them, so.
okay. Yeah, I think the wording changes on stipulation 13 that, you know, completed by a land surveyor for the site plan. That's pretty straightforward, I think. What's the people's feelings on bonding the work from the outset versus, I mean, if you did it in the way the applicant is suggesting, it would essentially be just the landscaping in the final course and the retaining wall and things like that, that would be covered by the bond, right?
I don't know what the standard practice is, maybe in terms of timing and what,
Well, we want them to
Miss-
get the bond in place before the building permit is issued, definitely.
Sure.
But in terms of construction, I mean, what I heard Mr. Maynard saying was that, you know, in his view, the standard practice was that they could begin sort of the initial elements of road construction and maybe drainage infrastructure before getting the bond.
No. And I'll defer to Mr. Duker, but I don't think they should be starting any of that until they have their bond in place.
Right, I guess that's what I was thinking, but I guess, just,
It's typically, they have to get their bond in place, and then we do a pre-construction meeting before their building permit is issued.
yeah, I think you don't want the project to get started and then, for whatever reason, it stops,
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
Okay. So what else do we have to talk about?
There was, Steve, I think you had suggested adding one of the stipulation regarding the Board of Public Works approval.
Yes. I want to just go back, stipulation number 1. So, we're asking for a waiver of the underground utilities, and whereas it's pretty common practice for us to do that on an existing street, for maybe a one or two family subdivision. Here, we're talking about a new street.
It's a new,
Right.
Why, how would that meet the spirit and intent of the regulation if we don't require underground utilities?
All right, let me just look at the waiver request.
Yep.
Question for staff. If they're connecting off of West Hollow Street and then going underground for the rest of the site, would they still need a waiver? And I'm not looking at the plan, so that may be not what they're asking for, but
oh, they're asking just to waive it all.
waive it all.
But we have in the past said we'll let you obviously go overhead to a point and then you
And then go
wanna
underground.
be underground or, you know, like, could go overhead to the,
But that's not what they're showing.
I'm having a hard time seeing it, so I can't. Can't see I'm not sure I see any. There's one up there, let me take a look.
One existing house.
Yeah, I don't see I don't see overhead or underground, so. Yeah, I'd be inclined to stay underground for this, or, you know, allow setting one pole off of West Hollis to a location on the site, and then from that pole. I mean, sometimes that's a little cleaner than digging all the way out to the street, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so, I don't think it's been addressed in here, but, I don't know, it might be best to understand, if you can understand what the plan is.
Well, I think if we don't waive underground, the plan's gonna be, and we say they're allowed to do one pole, and then it's underground, that'll be what it is.
All right, yes, you can amend that request.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I just want to touch back on
Yep.
stipulation 11. So it starts by saying, road and driveway construction shall be to base course with final course pavement remaining bonded until, is it intended to have that the road and driveway construction shall be the base course prior to something, prior to?
What would be prior to, typically the developer would like to put in the road to base course and the driveways, and then once the project is finished, then they come back and do it. So this way the road doesn't get beat up during
Right.
construction. So then prior to, until it's completed, but then prior to the CO, upon completion, it would have, prior to certificate of occupancy, it
Okay,
would
so-
have to be completed, or they'd have to keep a bond for it.
All right, so we want to add prior to certificate of occupancy
Okay.
there.
With respect to the
The
final
first.
course,
First
Yes.
sentence. Until
Oh,
remaining bonded until completion prior to issuance of CO.
I don't think you need until completion, I think you need just
Remaining bonded
until
until issuance of CO.
issuance is CO.
Okay.
But I want to know at what point you want the earlier construction. You see what I'm saying? Like Linda's explaining, you want a base course prior to getting somebody living there.
Oh,
Or how about final certificate of occupancy?
Right, to the
Final
first
one?
certificate of occupancy, yeah.
The road and driveway construction shall be the base course prior to first certificate of occupancy?
yeah, first certificate. With final course remaining bond until completion. That makes sense.
Okay.
Stipulation number 12, is the fire department okay with having no parking signs until the last person gets in?
They didn't specify, they just wanted it completed before they get their, before the project's completed.
I think I'd change first, though, the last to first.
I think that makes sense.
We could change it to the first.
Like, as soon as someone lives on the street, it's, yeah, okay. All right,
And I'm working through, because I think you need some more clarification. So if you compare 13 and 14, right? So 13 says prior to the issuance of the first CO.
yep,
We want as-built plans and so on.
Well, it says final, right? Prior to issuance of the final?
Oh, finals.
Right.
You know, mind me my dyslexia, because
yeah,
It's
that's
so-
final.
I saw final as first, and then in number 14 it says last, so final is last. Okay.
Yeah, they're both the same.
Yeah, it was the same.
They're both the same.
All right, my bad. All right, that's all. And you're going to, Adam is going to add a stipulation on the
Yes.
moratorium street.
All right. Have we talked through the third party versus the design engineer?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that engineering staff could decide they'll go with the design engineer if they want, but this would leave it to their discretion. That's my understanding what staff was suggesting, and I think that's permitted, but I don't think third party means it couldn't be the design engineer.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion points? No? Everybody willing to make a motion?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, fire away, and we'll see if we can.
It's,
We have an attorney.
may have to correct me on some of these, but I think I've taken pretty decent notes. All right. So I would make a motion to approve new business number 3, site plan, owner 711 West Hollis Street, site plan to construct an additional 4 units for a total of 5 houses on 1 lot. Finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in site plan NRO section 190-146D with a total of 16 stipulations. Stipulation number 1 is a waiver request with respect to underground utilities. That shall read, the waiver is not granted, finding that the waiver will be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation, provided that the applicant will be permitted to set 1 pole on the lot off of West Hollis Street, from which the utilities would then be set underground. Stipulation number 2 is also a waiver request from the maximum parking standards. That request is to read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 3, also being a waiver request from the minimum design standards for private streets. That waiver request shall read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation, but that the waiver shall be limited to the standards regarding width, lighting, curbing, and sidewalks only. Stipulations 4 through 8, reading is written in the staff report. Stipulation 9 shall be modified to read as follows. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall provide documents establishing a homeowners association, which will be responsible for maintaining all property in common ownership, and, as applicable, condominium documents. the homeowners association documents, and the condominium documents, as applicable, shall be submitted to the planning department and corporation council for review. Stipulation 10 shall read as written by the staff. Stipulation number 11 shall be revised to read as follows. Road and driveway construction shall be the base course prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy, with final course pavement remaining bonded until completion. Upon completion of construction, the applicant shall provide the city engineer with written certification signed by a third-party licensed professional engineer selected by city engineering at the applicant's expense, certifying that private street and driveways were installed in accordance with the approved design. Inspection report shall be filed with the city engineer's office and the planning department. Stipulation number 12 shall be revised to read as follows. Prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy, no parking sign shall be posted on both sides of Teresa Way. Stipulation number 13 shall be revised to read as follows. Prior to the issuance of the final certificate of occupancy for the development, an as-built plan locating all roads, driveways, units, other buildings, utilities, and site landscaping shall be completed by a licensed land surveyor and submitted to the planning department. The as-built plan shall include a statement that all construction was generally completed in accordance with the approved site plan and applicable local regulations. Road and sidewalk construction shall be the base course, with final course pavement remaining bonded until completion. Stipulations 14 and 15 is written in the staff report. And then the addition of a new stipulation indicating that the 5-year moratorium applies to the pavement abutting the property on West Hollis Street, and that Board of Public Works approval will be required for any excavation of such pavement.
Okay, I would just ask maybe before we second this, would you maybe amend the last sentence of 13 to take out the sidewalk component? Because I think we waived that anyway.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, so I would amend my motion to further revise stipulation number 13 to remove the words "and sidewalk construction" from the last sentence. Thank you.
Okay, so we have that motion to approve with those 16 stipulations as indicated by Mr. Varley, with that last amendment as well. Do we have a second on that? Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Mr.
Just-
Dukran?
Just a couple of points.
Mhm.
I know you removed the sidewalk construction. There might be a little bit of sidewalk reconstruction at the driveway on West Hollis Street, but I think we're covered. So as I discussed with Mr. Maynard earlier, there's no guarantee that the Board of Public Works will approve the digging in the street. So if that's the case, then this will have to wait. So the timing of seeking the approval might be important. So, like, do they want to seek the approval prior to applying for a building permit, for instance? So they don't, incur costs should they get denied.
Right. I mean, I think that's,
It certainly sounds like it would be advisable from their perspective.
yeah, I don't think we have to make them, but I think it's
Okay.
a good,
All right.
I mean, if they wanna get going or whatever, that's fine, but I think that, it's definitely advisable, right? Yeah. It's on the record, they got the advice. Make sense?
Okay, good.
All right, so we have the second. Any other further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion passes. Thanks. Okay. Moving on, we have, all right, thanks. Case number 4. John J. Flatley Company owner, application acceptance for proposed 1-year extension for site plan amendment to NR 2165 to construct 39,300 square foot flexible office space, property located at 100 through 326 Innovative Way. Do I have or could I have a motion as to whether this application is ready to take jurisdiction?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Harper. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. All yours.
Good evening. My name's Kevin Walker. I'm with the John Flatley Company. I guess before we start, does the board, I have a bigger drawing. Do you want me to stick that up there, or? do you wanna-
We have one in our packet, so I think. Oh, for the TV audience? Well, we're not on TV.
Oh, we will be.
You're being recorded.
Oh, yeah, right now.
Playback.
Yes, we're just being recorded.
You have another one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can put it up then. Thanks. Okay.
All right, so I'm here tonight, we're just looking for a one-year extension to the previous approval that the board gave us. Nothing's changed to the plan. Everything is the same. We've got 3 flex buildings, one there. They share a common area here. The 3rd building is over here. Again, nothing has changed since this was approved. We're starting to get proposals on some geotechnical, to get some borings done out there, get that going, and hopefully start moving at some point within the next year. Nothing definitive time-wise. We just need a little more time to put our ducks in a row.
Okay. Questions of the applicant? So this, staff, this is the first one-year extension for this, right?
Second.
Or is it second? Second one-year extension? Okay.
Question.
Mr. Peterson?
In this plan, are they reviewing the ramps to the highway to prevent traffic jams down on Spitbrook Road?
So this was already looked at as far as Spitbrook Road, and that was brought to the board's attention when it was approved way back when. I guess we're talking a couple of years now. And everything's okay out there at the front door. I guess this is kind of leading me into a little bit of a story. We are working right now with DOT at possibly putting a ramp off of the site further north of the Tower Heights Apartments. Among other things, some work on Spitbrook Road, possibly some work on the ramps. We're not that far yet. We're getting much closer to having a full scope of work hammered out. But we're working actually with the community development folks here in the city. They've been to a few of the DOT meetings with us. So they're really fully involved in the whole thing. One thing that did come up, and I'm kind of getting off track, but I'll make this quick, is I did receive a notice in the mail about Spitbrook Road improvements from Gateway Hills to DW Highway. So I do have a call in to.
My office. It's my office.
Yeah, so I've got a call, they gave me somebody else's name.
Yeah, well, the project manager.
Yeah, okay.
Ms. Brown.
So, well, can we meet at some point?
I know if she's planning to meet with you, but if
Okay.
you want to talk about what your plans are, what Mr. Walker is referring to is the city has on its list to be paved this year, a portion of Spitbrook Road from Gateway Hills down to Daniel Webster Highway. And I'm going to presume that you want to do some work within that area.
More likely than not, yeah. It's likely at some point within the next 5 years, let's put it that way. And if it's something that we can get together and maybe work on together and at least get the Spitbrook Road part of it squared away, then we won't have to revisit it within 5 years or have to wait 5 years.
So you're probably talking about some widening?
Widening, maybe a right turn lane into Gateway Hills. There wasn't too much, there was a little bit involved, but yeah, some widening and a right turn lane as you're heading west into the Terra Commons site.
Yeah. I know they're trying to put a meeting together with you, so
Okay,
should happen soon.
super.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant? No? Okay, we don't have anybody in the audience, so I'm assuming we don't have anybody that wants to speak in opposition or favor. So at this point, if there are no further questions, I'll go ahead and close the hearing. Enter the meeting. So just an extension of a plan that several of us have seen for a few times. Here now, anybody have any discussion that they want to do as part of the meeting, or good to go? Good to go, okay. Somebody want to make a motion to, this would be with regard to this site plan. So we're essentially making a motion on the plan again. Anybody?
Okay, if I try?
Sure, have at it.
I make a motion to approve the Nashua City plan, the new business case number 4 site plan, 1-year extension for the John J. Flatley Company. The proposal is to extend the site plan for 1 year. And we'll follow stipulation number 1 as written.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve new business number 4 with site stipulation as written in the staff report. Do we have a second on that?
A second?
Second by Mr. Varley. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Motion passes. All right, thanks for your patience.
I didn't envy you guys on all that.
Okay, so, case number 5, that one is postponed to September 12th of 2019. Other business, we have review of tentative agenda to determine proposals of regional impact. Has anybody had a chance to look
See you in
at this?
September.
Look at these technical review meeting minutes? They're like the mill yard.
A lot of them are repeats from the past.
Yeah, I'm not seeing,
Yeah, some of these are, I think, have already been approved.
yeah,
Yeah, you have to have one that's duplicated here.
yeah, there's some duplicates too.
They have individual numbers, but the numbers are different.
Yeah. Oh, true, yeah.
The Vasquez, oh, one is a conditional use, okay.
Yeah, the different
One's a
parts of it.
proposed site, okay.
So,
Should be different.
make a motion?
I'll make a motion, having reviewed the technical review meeting minutes, or whatever it is, that there are no proposals of regional impact.
All right, so we have that motion. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Peterson. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, any other discussion items anybody has? Roger, you go ahead.
I had one thing. I had talked with Scott yesterday, I believe it was. We're trying to set up a workshop for, like we always do, the annual training and workshop for May 9th. We try to do it between the first and the third meeting in May. And, we can do it on a Thursday night. That's easier. We'll make sure we have a room. I think that was booked earlier. So mark your calendars, and we'll send out a notice to everyone. If you have any things you want to bring up or items of discussion, please forward those to me. Obviously, I think we have a couple of items. I don't know if we want to talk sidewalks again, or if we want to talk.
Third party,
Third party.
yeah.
Well, do you think, Roger, you'll have some feedback on the sort of standard language for the
Right.
construction
And
control
some sort of-
affidavit that I put together?
Yeah, we're working on that, and we want to work with the legal department. But for turnaround and something like that, it's a little longer.
Yeah.
And we just need to probably have some discussion, and so we have some sort of guidelines as to when, you wouldn't necessarily use that like you did last time on a flat subdivision where where there wasn't maybe any need to require such a level. So you should kind of look at when you want to apply those or what kind of criteria you want to use.
Right.
It need to be a project where you may need to have more oversight on.
Yeah, so this would be May 9th. Yes, so Steve, maybe you could have some input at that meeting on the stuff that typically is gonna be covered by building permit.
Yeah.
And I don't know, would you be able to speak to that, or we need the
Yeah.
building
we-
inspector?
We are planning to
Okay.
talk to them
Yeah.
about
Okay,
that.
Yeah, the
right.
Yeah, I
board has to have reasons. If you're just going to apply it on a case-by-case basis. If you're going to apply it to everyone, well, then I think we need to look at changing the ordinance.
right. And I can give some ideas of like costs of what typical engineers might charge for that. I know that. So you know what you're asking for. Okay. So right now, we've got sidewalks, construction control affidavits that we'd put on there. Anything else that's for sure that would want to show up on that?
Yeah, is it a street or is it a driveway?
Yeah? Hopefully we'll get that next meeting.
Forms of legal ownership of property.
We might have to have our legal department for that one, but,
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's like the one you just looked at, that's going to be rented out. That's all one owner.
Yeah.
That was a townhome type of project. The other one was individual houses with individual driveways on a private, if you want to call it a drive, you can, I guess, but it's a named private street, really, and it's built to a different standard, and it's supposed to carry fire trucks and other vehicles into the site, and general traffic. That's going to take a lot more traffic than the driveways. It's not really a driveway to, a driveway is to your house, and it's usually off of a street, whether it's a public or a private street. It's very simple.
Well, we'll get some feedback on
Yeah.
that from council, so.
Well, if it was a driveway, then you wouldn't be having the fire department come in and refer to chapter 18 about, you know what I mean? It's definitely a
Exactly.
street.
You'd have a driveway, and it's not named.
But the
Like-
applicant said, oh, we're making it better than a driveway, it's gonna be 6 inches of.
Yeah, I
of-
wouldn't,
of-
we wouldn't
Not sure
talk,
we can.
yeah, let's not talk about applicants during this part of the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but if we want more clarification
We
on a
do.
topic like that, then we can certainly make that part of the workshop as well, okay? So it'd be, usually it's, what, 90 minutes or something that we normally?
Yeah.
90 minutes, May 9th, we want to start at the same time, 7 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
One quick thing I want to add.
Yep.
I brought some photographs, so I passed it around because probably want to be captured in the record. Talking about a third party, and I wouldn't say who did this or not.
Right.
But this is just recent. This is last fall, a recent two-lot subdivision. So the first one I'll pass is what it looked like before, right? It's on the left side of the street, you can pass it down.
No curb.
No curb, that's existing. And this is how it is now. And look at the result of, you know, I would say a poor design and poor construction. Yeah, here's a further picture. New homeowners moved in and they're calling just about everybody. They are at the mayor's office right now. And they're wondering what kind of recourse, what course of action they can take.
So that's a new-looking house. Is this a project we approved?
Be approved. It was built in, it was built in the fall.
Which one is this? What project is this to?
I probably don't want to say it in public.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, without curb, you know, the edges of the streets breaking away, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was happened, so I don't think the design was refined as we expect. You know, we hear a lot about, well, I don't have to show grades, and I don't have to show this, I have to show that. And, and so it gets
Just throw
built,
it at a
and
Scott.
that's the result.
And then you leave it up to the contractor to tell you everything is okay.
So it was a two-family.
Look at these
Any other
dates.
discussion items?
It was before.
And I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
So moved.
Aye.
Aye.
So we are adjourned at 9:21.